Who's ready to talk about AI? Our favorite topic. Okay, AI has been on an interesting journey in 2025 into 2026, to say the least. It really reached ahead thanks to our Lord and Savior, Satya Nadella. He writes on his scratch pad here, looking forward to 2026, and he talks a lot about it being a pivotal year for AI. Now, I guess to kind of disclose where I'm at with AI, if it's a tool and I see some positive use cases here, that's great. Look, I'm not out here like back in the old days. If Thomas Edison pulled up to me and said, "Dog, I got a light bulb," I'd say, "Hey, fam, my oil lamp is doing me good. Get the fuck out of here," right? Like, I'm not acting like that with AI, but I really have yet to see some positive use cases on what exactly AI is going to do for me, the common human on this planet, that is not benefiting some corporate overlord that's getting injected with tons and tons of cash for some arbitrary future that no one really seems to have a true grasp on. It's just called the next big thing. It doesn't look anything more than a money pit to me. So that's my take on AI here. Satya Nadella disagrees. He says here that it's a concept that involves bicycles for mind. And we think of same shit, AI as a scaffolding for human potential versus a substitute. What matters is not the power of any given model, but how people choose to apply it to achieve their goals. We need to get beyond the arguments of slop versus sophistication and develop a new equilibrium in terms of our theory of the mind that accounts for humans being equipped with these new cognitive amplifier tools as we relate to each other. This is the product design question we need to debate and answer. So obviously you've already seen on social media when he asked you to stop calling it slop, everyone started calling them Microslop because Microsoft is a leader in the shittiest parts of AI. You see headlines like this, Satya Nadella says as much as 30% of their code is written by AI, and then you see how absolutely terrible Windows is, how terrible things are going at Xbox, and you're like, oh, weird how these things are starting to overlap all of a sudden here. And the AI tools that are being invested in are so bad, as Windows Central documents here, nobody wants to use them. We're at the point, by the way, if you fire a paint, right? Remember Paint? It uses Copilot now. They have fucking shoved this thing into every single corner of Windows. And it's why Windows is, among many other reasons, falling off here. Because we never had this big anti-Windows push. Like, it was kind of minimized, but its AI has exploded it because Microsoft's attention is split in so many different ways, and they're clearly all in on AI that all the minimal quality they had is slipping through here. Now, let's read this article from Windows Central here, because they say if there's one thing that typifies Microsoft under CEO Satya Nadella's tenure, it's the general inability to connect with customers. Perfectly said. A recent report from The Information detailed how Microsoft's internal AI efforts are going awry with cut forecasts and sales goals for its Azure AI products across the board. The Information said that Microsoft sales people are struggling to meet goals owing to a lack of demand. Microsoft denied the reports, but it can't deny market share growth trends, all of which point to Google Gemini surging ahead. Last week, we read about how Microsoft's Copilot backend partner OpenAI issued a code red situation because ChatGPT has fallen behind Gemini in its problem solving. And so with OpenAI's business model under constant scrutiny and racking up genuinely dangerous levels of debt, it's become a cascading problem for Microsoft to have tied up in another layer of business what might end up being something of a lame duck here. And so you can see the usage charts here. ChatGPT is by and far the highest usage amount, followed by Copilot, but we see Gemini is slowly going to overtake it. Get out of here, Windows Central. Love you guys, but no. And we see the gap here for these other AI tools is just really low. Grok being at below 1% is hilarious, by the way, because of just how many people I see on Twitter going like, at Grok, explain this for me. At Grok, can you generate this image for me? So funny. Below 1% for that. What's happening here is now Microsoft a month later, right? Because the headline here from Windows Central, again, December 8th, now we're at the end of January here. Microsoft loses a massive $440 billion in market cap as shares tank here. So if you don't think the panic is setting in here, as we get into other case points from video game developers all the way to things like ChatGPT business model shifts and Nvidia, if you don't think the panic setting in for these companies, you're kidding yourself right now. Even if you're pro AI, I respect the thought process, but you can see that it's not turning out as they had hoped here. Microsoft's stock just achieved an unsettling milestone. Microsoft can now claim to have experienced the second largest single-day stock decline in history, wiping an absurd $440 billion in market value from the tech giant. The only drop behind that is of Nvidia last year, who experienced a similar deep shock when China's efficient DeepSeek AI model implied that it didn't need as much as Nvidia tech to have capable chatbot as it had thought. Microsoft's share price dropped a whopping 5.37% today and is almost down 14% for the month of January 2026 so far. And we can see that right here on screen here. So Microsoft is losing money because people are starting to lose faith in their AI tool and taking that money and investing it in other companies with their AI tools here. They say the stock revolves entirely around Azure, Microsoft's biggest division by far, but investors are growing increasingly wary about Satya Nadella's strategy surrounding Azure and artificial intelligence in particular. Azure grew by 39%, which sounds fantastic, but Wall Street apparently wanted more. Investors were also unimpressed by the future-facing statement of the further 37% growth. Cloud revenue surpassed $50 billion atop a huge $81.3 billion annual revenue. By the way, these are like video game numbers, dude. This is insane. Like, the fact that anyone's unsatisfied with any of these numbers is insane. Up 17% year over year. Operating income was up 21% year over year with a net of $38.5 billion. Microsoft 365 Copilot was up 160% year over year. GitHub Copilot was up 75%, and shareholder returns were up 32% year over year. What more could investors possibly want, you might ask? Well, the explanation doesn't make a lot of sense to me either as a lowly pauper, but all of this still isn't enough. The real reason that stock is down is because growth doesn't reflect the capital expenditure Microsoft is committed to artificial intelligence and infrastructure surrounding it, construction in essence, and the risk therein. CapEx has jumped almost $40 billion for the quarter, up around 70% year over year. Tons of money has been poured into Nvidia GPUs, which might make a decent shelf life in your gaming PC, but depreciate in value incredibly quickly as part of a huge data center. Investors are basically concerned that Microsoft won't see any meaningful returns on Silicon investiture before everything needs to be upgraded or replaced. So people are basically out on Microsoft and taking their money elsewhere. So Microsoft, who has put all of their resources into AI and it's hurt the Xbox business most notably, is now losing out on that front of the business because everyone believes this is the next big thing. And because it's the next big thing, they're all putting their chips on the table. And Microsoft has now shown they are standing to lose a lot because of it. Investor support, scrutiny of their AI products, and now possibly even Xbox. Speaking of which, how is this affecting the games industry is a big question here. GamesIndustry.biz is at GDC, and they conducted a survey recently that showed that layoffs are up 6%, 36% of the industry is using AI, and that there's an overwhelming support for industry unionization. But there's also another part of this polling here that I wanted to highlight for you guys, which is right here. 36% of respondents said that they used AI in their work, although uptake varied between disciplines. Those at game studios that reported using AI tools, like 30% less than those at publishing companies, support teams, and marketing/PR firms, 58%. The business professionals' usage at 58% far outweighs most other job disciplines. 47% of upper management reported using AI tools, while only 29% of more junior positions reported doing so. Studio directors sat in the middle with 36% AI usage. And you can see that, dear God, I didn't realize how small that picture is. Here we go. Let's do your thing, magnifier. There we go. So you can see the tool that's used the most is ChatGPT, and you can see what the tools are used for, mostly for research and brainstorming, but it goes down all the way to things like 20% almost are using it for asset generation, procedural generation at 10%, 5% for player features, player-facing features, code assistance, 47% here. So yeah, what you're seeing here is a lot of people embracing AI. Now, what exactly does this mean here? Well, the sentiment against generative AI continues to rise. 52% of respondents said that generative AI was having a negative impact on the industry, a steady increase from 30% in 2025 and 18% in 2024. This is a really key point here because obviously one of the centerpieces of the conversation involving Gen AI was what Divinity with Larian Studios, the golden child industry, they just went through their own dragging of the public for using Gen AI to the point where they dropped using Gen AI for their concept art. In light of that controversy here, we have this article from This Week in Video Games where they interviewed 12 separate concept artists who said that Gen AI actually makes their job harder. And again, this is all built off the back of what was happening with Larian. Now, a lot of this is basically teeing up what Sven had said, which is they use their AI tools to explore references, which they no longer do now. But then they describe what a concept artist does. I'll keep this simple so we can avoid a little bit of the reading here. Basically, concept artist is responsible for the foundation of everything you see visually in a game. They're responsible for thinking out like not just technology and what it looks like, but how it works. Does it use gears? What do those gears do? What are they connected to? They have to think those things out. So a lot of their time is spent, as described in this article here, doing research. They say here part of gathering images, but also reading articles, watching media, assessing the competition, watching videos about the way things work, consuming scientific papers. Artists are like scientists. It's what I've always said. They have to fundamentally understand how a thing works. And that's why a lot of artists, at least the ones I work with, are really intelligent, because they have to know a lot about everything to make accurate looking pieces for their game world. So if you're making like a sci-fi game, you need to like deeply understand energy transfer and like how like computers work and that sort of stuff, right? Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. How does Gen AI hurt a concept artist, for example, here, especially in an industry that we just saw here is 52% of them who were surveyed here are against Gen AI. Well, how does it hurt a developer? Kim Hu, a freelance illustrator, concept artist, and designer who served as the lead concept artist on Rollerdrome, awesome game, says outsourcing even part of the early ideation to AI robs you of the discovery, as it will likely or more or less give you exactly what you asked for. On the other hand, going through archives and real-world references will allow you to stumble upon things you never thought of before, informing and branching out your ideas further. Going into these accidental rabbit holes is a pivotal step of concept and world building to me. Now, I think some people might read that and go, all right, like I get it, but that doesn't seem too fundamental. Like, isn't the goal to find that endpoint here? But the idea is finding things you never considered, like combining two worlds. Like, hey, this Wild West element doesn't really go well with this sci-fi element, but can I find a way for those worlds to meet? And that might give you a unique technological aesthetic, whereas ChatGPT would give you something very literal to that. Paul Scott Canavan is an artist who worked as an art director and concept artist for projects like Destiny 2, Heroes of the Storm, Guild Wars 2, and Netflix's The Witcher. He believes Gen AI entails the same problem Gen AI has across the board. There's no originality. We've heard this one before here, right? It's just that it's being pulled from other pieces of art here. But I thought the most interesting description here was this one. They said, Gen AI images present me with a spoiled broth. I don't know where the ingredients came from. And that's how he puts it. And working to break down those amalgamated images back to their original components to dig for their original context naturally takes time. One senior concept artist who wished to protect their identity due to their role at a major game developer told us the studio leadership currently asked them to work from AI-generated references. They say they would often have to reverse engineer where the pieces of the image composite came from and work off what I'm able to find of careful searches on the internet. Things like hairstyles, clothing, props, and so on. In addition to assuring the company was protected from potential legal blowback, given the project was a well-known IP, this artist reasoned that this task was something that they felt they had to do in principle for the benefit of their peers. So when I'm putting a design package together for a 3D artist, either in-house or off-site, they actually have reference that they can use instead of the time-wasting deciphering of what the output image reference is. I feel like I'm responsible for others I work for on my project. And for me, that's a normal part of my job. So what you're also seeing is it creates more work because obviously there's a legality concern with AI and where the source of these things is. And if you can't decipher that, then you might be stealing someone's work incidentally. We look at what happened with Marathon, where there was deliberate work stolen. We see how that blows up in a developer's face here. And AI is going to present that issue here. So now you have a senior artist who has to take the Gen AI image they're given and parse through it to find the original material anyway. So it kind of defeats the purpose of itself here, right? But also, it's a little bit of a blow to morale when you're handed, say a developer says, we want something like this, and they hand you a Gen AI image. You've basically already been told what to make. Now you're treating an artist like a printer. That's another problem there. When you treat an artist like a printer and they can't be creative, your artists burn out and your artists lose steam and they produce far less. At least in my experience, where when artists are more constrained, where like when I first started working on my game and we had to sort of do this, make this relationship in the very early days of our game, this actually became a problem because I was treating artists, which I didn't really know this at the time, I wasn't a professional, as a printer. That becomes a problem. When we kind of loosened up and just said, dude, go crazy with it, I trust you. Not only was the work better, I was seeing ideas I never considered, which is the most exciting part of a project, but also the energy was higher. Everyone was feeling good, right? So when you rob into that process, there are both tangible and intangible effects here. So now we know how the games industry impact is happening here. We'll carry it one step forward. Let's take a look at Nvidia, who was crashing out recently here. This is the Nvidia CEO, January 12th, 2026, who says, and so it sounds like it's really important to have this conversation. Extremely hurtful, frankly. And I think we've done a lot of damage with very well-respected people who have painted a doomer narrative, end-of-the-world narrative, science fiction narrative. And I appreciate that many of us grew up and enjoyed science fiction, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful to people. It's not helpful to the industry. It's not helpful to society. It's not helpful to the government. There are a lot of people in the government who obviously aren't as familiar. I'm sorry, am I misreading this? There's many people in the government who obviously aren't as familiar with as comfortable with the technology. Okay, so I'm not bugging. That doesn't read right to me. But anyway, we have the CEO of Nvidia who's also just out sword and shield protecting AI and saying like basically, hey guys, like this conversation's hurtful. This dude is hurt over how you feel about AI because they can't handle how you feel that way, because if you don't support it, they're not getting money. They're not getting investor money because no one sees a future in this. There's no better example of this right now than ChatGPT, who just announced that they are expanding into advertising. This is something that Sam Altman, the head of ChatGPT, said a couple of years ago, that I kind of think of ads as a last resort for us as a business model. But here we are in 2026 and OpenAI, ChatGPT, is going to be serving you up some ads. Must be going really well for them. It's clear these CEOs are getting desperate and concern is starting to set in. And if that wasn't enough here, it's starting to hit the consumer in the wallet here. We can see the trend here over the last 18 months of the price of RAM and how it was gradually going up as AI was going up. And then we see the massive spike at the end of the year, and it's holding there. Now, an ASUS representative actually talked about this and said that the prices will probably normalize by 2027 once we have the RAM shortage figured out. But the key point of this headline here is nobody wants to lower their prices here. They say it's really hard to say. I think memory vendors, like actual memory chip manufacturers, they never run their factories at 100% capacity. They always try to run their fabs at maximum capacity because, you know, for the best price, you want to use all the resources you have. But they usually have some idle capacity. They can bring additional manufacturing lines online and reactivate maybe some of the older ones that have extra capacity. So if there's an increase in demand, they can increase their supply. But there's only so much flexibility. And I think from the demand right now for memory is so high, and we all know where that comes from, which is obviously AI. He says, my personal gut feeling is that it's going to be relatively long. I feel like prices are not going to come down soon. I saw that some people expect prices to already drop in the middle of 26 or towards the end of 26. That's the most optimistic I've heard. And then maybe the most pessimistic is 28 and 28 beyond. I think it's probably going to be something in between. My personal gut feeling is 27 is when we see the price start to normalize. This is important context because to me, it's really the top of the headline here that nobody wants to be first. This reminds me a lot of when COVID was ongoing and there was a lot of confusion around COVID and pricing, and like things went up in value, like toilet paper, for example, right? Because there were shortages on it, and there became eventually an artificial scarcity where things like groceries nowadays are starting to see a hike in price, even though they don't need to be more expensive because consumers have adjusted to that high price. So now the profit margins for like producing, say, something that was very cheap stays the same, and then you're selling it for like double the price it once was at. And so now I think obviously it's not good for business to have prices like this here going up this much. And I'm sure they'll regulate a little bit, but I think a lot of these companies are going to try to take advantage of the market confusion, the will they, won't they, and leave the prices in a relatively high area where you'll look at like a 5090, which is over $5,000 and go, well, it's $3,000 now. I'd rather pay that than $5,000. And you're going to get some people who will spring for that. And so I just think with where AI is at right now, I don't think it ever permanently goes away. I think you can't put that kind of lightning back in the bottle, if you want to call it that, the genie back in the bottle, rather, the genie back in the lamp. What you can say is I think a lot of these companies are going to falter dramatically because of it. And they're going to have to start focusing their resources elsewhere to recoup, because eventually one AI to rule them all. And when that happens, it's kind of a done deal. Like there's no more like we're making the push and we're making the push and we're making the push. I'm sure there'll still be some that try, but to this level, I think it'll be a fruitless effort. So yeah, I think AI isn't going anywhere fast, but I do also think that it's failing and these companies are starting to panic.